We finally reached the end, Dead or Alive 6, the last game released in the series and some attribute it to the death of the series. While the DLC was heavily added on to the Dead or Alive 5 game, Dead or Alive 6 was born with these concepts in mind, and while Dead or Alive 5 was a success story, 6 was far from it. The game's initial unveiling, which toned down the fan service for what looked like a more toned down version before going back on the word. But where does Dead or Alive 6 stand? Is it a good game with just some overblown aspects, or is it just as bad as everyone says? I'm Budget Disney Princess, and this is my review of Dead or Alive 6. The first thing you'll notice when looking at Dead or Alive 6 is still to this day it's a stunning game. The character models have been touched up along with the environments, and it's much more colourful than the previous colour palette of 5. While it definitely looks more visually stunning, there's a certain uncanny polish that makes the character look very glossy and more like action figures in some places rather than people in other places. The new stages and environments are pretty uninspired unfortunately. A boxing ring and the tournament aren't very interesting environments. The stage with all the cars blown up is just a worse version of one we've already seen, and the returning stages, which there seems to be a lot of, don't have a lot to really differ from what we've seen before. The environments definitely look better, and so do the character models, with everything seeming a lot more colourful and vibrant. This game came out in 2019 and still looks beautiful. However, I do have some critiques, and this may come down to a personal opinion. Dead or Alive 5 seemed to go for a much more realistic approach, and Dead or Alive 6 is kind of a mixture of the two. While the character models are definitely more detailed, as we've seen so far, they're also designed to be flawless. I get that these characters are supposed to be beautiful people, model-like and flawless, however that flawless approach is also a problem with the realism. The characters are too perfect. Even when they're being roughed up and supposed to be sweaty and bloody, their skin is always flawless, their hair is always flawless. This would be fine if it didn't go against the system of your character getting beaten up or dirty rolling around in the mud. The characters come off looking like plastic dolls a lot, especially in the shinier environments. And I mentioned before how the models in previous games look like dolls with big anime eyes. 6 is sort of different. It's more the skin shininess and the way the characters react to their environment that really gives off some Uncanny Valley vibes. Don't get me wrong, I think it looks better than 5 when it comes down to visual fidelity, but as for the lighting I have to say it's nowhere near as good as 5. Dead or Alive 6 scrapped a few characters, like Genfu and Leon, which honestly, I never really played them that much, would have preferred either over Brad Wong though. The two new characters introduced here are Nico and Diego. Diego and Nico, two characters that, well, they're characters. Diego seems to have come out of nowhere as this amazing fighter, and Nico seems to take over the role of Lisa as the evil scientist type. I just never got into the tiny girl archetype. It was one of the reasons it took me a while to get into Marie Rose. I couldn't stand her character for so long, but eventually after giving her a fair shot and using her fighting style eventually made me enjoy her as a character. Nico, however, her style is one I just can't get into. It goes for stunning with her electricity to follow up combos and mix-ups. Stunned, which may appeal to some people, but for me who goes for speedy characters, it just didn't do anything for me. While Nico is different, Diego however is just so standard. I'm sure there's people who can use and utilise him in an incredible manner, but for me I never got past the basics as I found him pretty boring. The only thing I can say is he looks like Travis Touchdown, and I like Travis Touchdown. Even the DLC characters were ones that were already seen before. Neo Tengu, Phase 4, Rachel, Mamiji and Mai Shiranui return here. Still with not much difference from their original game counterparts. There was 2 brand new characters though. Also from the King of Fighters series, Kula Diamond appears, which is a cool choice. Although it wouldn't have been my first. I'm really surprised they went for her over Athena or Yori, who I feel would have fit a lot better here. And the character who is released as the final DLC, Tamaki, a character who had previously only appeared in an Extreme Beach game. For what it's worth, it's nice to play as Mai finally, even though I think I would have rathered her much more in Dead or Alive 5. Kula Diamond, I may have a little bias from playing her a lot in King of Fighters, but honestly I think they did a great job adapting her fighting style from 2D to 3D. If you think recycled DLC characters are bad though, there's also DLC costumes that have been recycled. In fact, the vast majority of them are. The costumes already completed being resold again? Yeah, that's not for me. Even though there is some new ones that are incredible, like Kasumi's Deluxe Alt, and a lot of Kokoro's new ones are awesome, but then you get useless crap like school uniforms and wedding dresses or bikinis, which I genuinely couldn't give a crap about. Could they have made these costumes free? Sure. and they could have worked on selling the newer ones while packing the game with content, but I'm guessing the money was just too tempting, especially with how much money Dead or Alive 5 had made. Now, while 5 had the story mode there, it was still a bit confusing. The story mode laid it out well enough for you to follow though. Dead or Alive 6, however, has no word of a lie, the worst implementation of a story mode that I've ever seen in a game. It's so bad, literally, when I finished my playthrough, I had to look up what happened, because I had no idea what the hell was going on. Why is it so bad? Well, Dead or Alive 6's story is unlocked in parts, meaning that you unlock parts of the story depending on what you do next. This could unlock not just future, but past events too, meaning you might not have a clue what on earth is going on, or why this character is doing this at this place, or that at that place, until you defeat another character's section. Nonetheless, I'll try and play it out as simple as I can. Mist hires a new character, Nico, in order to work on a resurrection protocol, hoping to bring back Raidu among others from the dead. To complete the project fully, however, they'll need a sample. Hanukkah, who debuted as a DLC character in the last game, being one of Raidu's secret daughters, shares the same abilities, making her the perfect test subject. Fortunately, Helena knows what's up and sends Marie Rose, her assistant, to befriend Hanukkah and keep an eye on her. Hayate meets Rig, who doesn't remember him whatsoever, as he was brainwashed at the time. Base comes to his rescue and Hayate leaves confused. Tina and Base are on a high point in their wrestling career when Helena appears offering a sponsorship, which they gladly accept. Nico meets with Kokoro, who is still searching for her mother, and explains that she knows who she is and where she is. This piques Kokoro's interest more. Eventually, after talking to Helena for a while, it comes out that they're secret half-sisters. As Kokoro defeats Helena and rushes off, Zack comes to the rescue to calm her down. The DOA tournament happens with the finals between Janly and Diego, with Janly coming out on top. However, Diego wins in an unofficial rematch. As Rig is watching the match, Christy approaches him and says he's Winter Soldier code, which sets him right off. There's a big scrap with the gang as Rig and Hayate face off. Rig gets dealt with easily, but a robot who looks very similar to Raido appears. A Raidobot, if you will. With everyone fighting, Christy manages to slip in and fly away with Hanukkah. Ryu, Ayane, Kasumi, Bayman, Hayate, Helena and Marie Rose all decide to track her down, but by the time they get there she's already been milked dry. Marie Rose and Bayman decide to save her, while Helena ends up battling Nico in the lab. Kasumi, Ayane, Ryu and Hayate meet the new experiment, which if you haven't guessed by now is the reincarnated Raidu, and fight him. You get a choice between picking Kasumi, Hayate and Ayane, who all have beef. Kasumi is the one that murdered him, Hayate was paralysed by him, and Ayane is his daughter, so I will give props for the options. Regardless, Raido was put back into the ground and dealt with quite quickly. He pretty much just woke up to be put back to sleep. This game ends on a cliffhanger, with Helena and Nico talking, with Nico saying, "Yeah, I resurrected Raidu, but he wasn't the only one." And Helena's like, "Who else did you do?" And Nico's like, "Your mom?" The story ends with a point of view shot, with someone, presumably Helena's newly resurrected mother, looking at them from behind the machines. This is canonically where the story ends, and with the way Dead or Alive is right now, it could be resolved within the next couple of years, or never. Despite the bad story, the stretched out unlockables, the lesser roster and stages, this whole game can be saved by one simple thing, the gameplay. The stage transitions and environmental damage is still here, although the cliffhangers have been removed, the critical blows are gone, but the critical stun is still here. The speed thankfully has remained. Unfortunately, this is where everything goes to poop. 6 debuted a new engine, so everything was worked from the ground up. This means that there's a lot less of bounce for extended combos that may need some workaround. The scripted combos like Tina's punches into throws still work, but for some more looser combos, it may not work as well as it did in the previous games. Debuting here is the break blow system, which I literally despise and hope to goodness it never appears in a Dead or Alive game again. It's a meter with 4 bars that build up over time. When your meter fills up to the fullest, you get a free hard-hitting special move that takes out nearly a quarter of your opponent's health bar, or vice versa. Unlike the critical burst before, there is no charge and it's just a quick button press, meaning you're going to be seeing this move again and again. The critical burst system nailed it, and yet now we have this subpar mechanic, but this is nothing compared to its secondary mechanic. Each 2 bars allows you a guaranteed reversal in Dead or Alive. A game with an amazing reversal system already, and this is just hands down an awful decision. Most fighting games work on footsies, a back and forth looking for an opening. Dead or Alive stood out because it had a certain rhythm that makes the reversals a core part of the normal fighting style. This completely destroys the rhythm, and with how fast the meter fills and how frequently the AI uses it, you're going to have your combos constantly interrupted and at least take a hit at some point. There is not even an option to turn the system off. Never has an added mechanic gone so completely against the core mechanics of the gameplay. I'll be happy if this system never returns. I spoke briefly about how the DLC costumes are a large chunk of this game. While thankfully there is extra costumes here to get, unfortunately it's very annoying to get them. Dead or Alive 6 bought in the shop, where outside of the DLC costumes you could also purchase costumes with your fight money, but what looks like a character having unlockable 15 costumes at first glance usually buys down to about 5 at the most. To make the costumes look a lot more plentiful, they decided to add recolours in as costumes. Now, I'm all for costume recolours, but having recoloured versions of the same costumes seems like a lazy way to pad out the selection. The fact that Dead or Alive never had recolours in the earlier games could be excused, but for 5 when you are purchasing them, they should have been there. But 6 just takes the cake and feels like a kick in the teeth to anybody who may have asked for alternate colours. Especially when the fight money given is bare pennies. This means to unlock a costume you like, you're really going to have to grind. You don't get a single cent for defeating the god awful story mode, so the way to earn money is playing online or arcade or survival mode. So you work your butt off, grind, and then you'll be able to buy a costume. Okay, got it. Actually, there's more to it. Along with the fight money, the game also uses something called fabric, which you earn the same way as you earn fight money. And what this does is to buy a costume, you have to unlock enough fabric points for that certain costume, which is completely randomised. Grind, and more grind. There is cutscenes here to watch in the theatre mode that you're never going to use unless you're addicted to cringe and didn't get your full the first time around. The music from previous games is back too, thank goodness, and you can unlock titles and bits of information revolving around the world and its characters, which, okay, cool I guess. Dead or Alive 6 just seems so lacking and soulless compared to previous games. The bits of unlockables you can get are unfortunately padded out to make the game seem much more content filled than it is. Dead or Alive 6 is a game you can have fun with, sure, when taken on its face value, but when held up against the games that preceded it, it falls fairly short of expectations. Even with all the downloadable content offered, the game still failed horribly and didn't come close to the previous game. The removed features like tag mode and the final roster of characters can't help but make me feel that the sales of the downloadable content were heavily dependent upon, and they did not manage to reach that quota. So that's what Dead or Alive 6 feels like to me whenever I pop it in, an incomplete game. A game with some potential that was just thrown away because of a mixture of mess-ups, bad decisions, and a heavy reliance on going full livestream service game. All I can hope is that when the inevitable Dead or Alive 7 is announced, or a reboot of the series, I hope they learn the lesson of offering single player content. I want Dead or Alive to succeed. I want it to come back. I absolutely love this series, but as a fan of the series, I want to be treated with the same respect that I treat the franchise. I fully believe the next game will be sort of a soft reboot to the series, but it all comes down to how it's handled. Dead or Alive 7 could be the nail in the coffin, and maybe the saviour, but this depends on how it's handled, and also this is just speculation. At this point, the Dead or Alive 7 hasn't even been announced yet. I've been Budget Disney Princess, and this has been my Dead or Alive 6 retrospective. Thank you so much for joining me. With my retrospective finally complete, I think it's time for me to rank these games and how much I enjoyed them. On the bottom at number 6 is the original Dead or Alive, which a great game at its time, hasn't aged nearly as well as later games in the series. Number 5 will go to the latest game in the series, Dead or Alive 6, which just ended up being a massive disappointment. Number 4 will go to Dead or Alive 3, which is a great game, but just doesn't offer the content that other games in the series offer. Number 3 will go to Dead or Alive 4, which stands on its own in the Dead or Alive series of games. It's definitely a game that will surprise you with how fun it is when you go back to it. Number 2 is Dead or Alive Ultimate 2, content packed, loads of characters, loads of features, and a style that still holds up. When I think of classic Dead or Alive Ultimate 2 is my first thought. And for my number 1 pick, it's Dead or Alive 5 Last Round. Despite a bad legacy, I see 5 as the absolute pinnacle of the series. So much content, so much characters, personality, costumes, there is so much here to enjoy. Last Round is still a game I pop in frequently to this day, and deserves its place in the Fighting Game Hall of Fame. Getting through these games and experiencing them for the first time has been one heck of an adventure, full of ups and downs, and I absolutely loved my time. And so finally, after all this time, I'm finished. Although I must admit I probably am going to go back to playing some of the Dead or Alives for just pure enjoyment in the future. Thank you so much for listening. I've been Budget Disney Princess, and these have been my Dead or Alive retrospectives. Peace.